Hello everybody, my name is Manu and welcome to another Eternal Contenders video series here on my channel. Today I'm gonna share my latest version of the scrap metal deck with you. This is scrap metal v3. I yesterday broke some major ground with the archetype and wanted to share it with you guys because so far I didn't really see any way to further improve the archetype, since the decklist is so tight and so synergy based. But I finally found a way to push it even further and increase the archetype even more, and I think by now this deck is really powerful, and I have used it yesterday to go on a pretty strong streak, more than 70% over like 25 to 30 games, to climb a couple of spots into the top 10. Like after the last video, the rally aggro video, I tried a couple things, dropped down to rank 12, and as you may or may not know, at this point in the season it is super hard to climb back up. Like I think I went like 19.7 or 19.8 with Kalis and climbed maybe like 2 or 3 places upwards with this performance, which is incredible. Let me tell you that, like, you need win percentages of like 70% plus basically to make some ground, and then you still need like 5-6 wins in a row to climb from say like 9 to 8. So yeah, you need like a really consistent, really reliable, strong deck to do so, and Kalis was one, like scrap metal was one of the decks that helped me do that while testing the change that I made. So let's talk about the change. So basically I was thinking and occasionally also talking in Discord about how, one second, let me just put myself away here, how Charchain Flail would be like the most likely addition that I would like to make to the deck, mainly to make Stash more effective and more powerful, since the Stash have felt more like a necessary evil rather than a good card, which is unfortunate because the card is so powerful that it should feel better than this. And the deck had some minor issues basically with having like consistently enough gas, enough power. Sure, a lot of the time that didn't matter, like both sides didn't have much going on and nobody does anything and you're just in like a top deck war, but that's still kind of random, like that's not too controllable. That top deck war can easily go into the opponent in the opponent's favor, so having a way to overall increase gas and power in the deck is nice to reduce the variance on those situations and make sure that we can control more how it goes in longer games and that we can overpower our opponents. My main problem basically was how to incorporate it, like how to fit it, because nothing really seemed cuttable with the deck until I started thinking more and more about Torch in the deck and started questioning Torch. Because if you look at the card has like basically no synergy with the deck whatsoever, and a lot of things that you torch outside of like a couple of smaller flyers like Valkyrie and Forza, for example, are dealt with fairly well by our like army of tokens on the ground. And we also have like removal for bigger units anyway with Madness, Combust and Kalis. So yeah, Torch seemed less and less appealing, especially in the current environment with not so many decks where Torch is like super good. All these like mid-range decks with a lot of resilient units. But even outside of that like metagame shift, Torch always kind of felt mediocre and a bit out of place in the deck the more I thought about it. Like the card never was great for me. A lot of the things that Torch usually does in other decks and that makes Torch good in other decks is that it can do so many things. Like for example, it can kill relic weapons. But we don't even really care about relic weapons because we have a bunch of throwaway 1/1s that make relic weapons look really bad and really embarrassing, so we don't really need Torch to stop those. We can just do that with our units. similar against a lot of early game units, especially the ground units. We are already really good against those, so we don't really need Torch there. So we are also not aggressive enough to care about Torch dealing 3 to the face, because if we win, we're gonna usually win. Then if we're gonna win this turn with Torch, we usually can win the next turn or 2 turns from now, because this deck is like grindy and controlling, so it takes over the game and doesn't like need to cheese out opponents with Torch before losing ground. It will usually win so decisively, and then you don't need Torch to end the games. So all that is basically left that Torch does is it kills like smaller flyers. And yeah, once I thought about this, I figured like, why not cut Torch at a 3rd stash? Because if we actually like add more weapons to make stash better, then the 3rd stash actually becomes pretty appealing. And alongside that, add 3 Charchain Flail, which in a lot of situations do the same as Torch, or sometimes even better than Torch. Like say your opponent drops a Crownwatch Paladin, I'd rather have a Charchain Flail for 1 to get rid of this rather than a Torch. And against 1-drops like Oni and Pyronite and stuff like that, Flail is as good as Torch basically, because it's also like a 1 power removal. It has the upside of like being milled into our void with Quarry, so we can get it back with stash without ever having to draw it. I always liked the synergy between Flail and stash in the sense that Flail provides a lot of tempo that you can gain back that stash costs you. Like for example, on 6 or 7 power you stash back like 2 units, a Flail, a Kalis. Suddenly you can go drop like that Grenadin drone or Slumbering Stone and a Flail for like 5, 6 and kill one of their like threats to impact the board the same turn you played stash, and set up like a solid Kalis next turn on a small board, for example, which is great. Like there's a lot of synergy going on with this. Sure, sometimes you have like a Kalis out already and then Flail is a bit awkward and kind of useless, but then again, if we have an active Kalis, we are usually winning and doing pretty well, so having that Flail in hand won't matter much. And even if the opponent can deal with our Kalis, it's nice to have like a backup. And unlike Torch, Flail has like exactly the flexibility in this deck that Torch usually has in a lot of other decks. Like for example, it's a threat, like it can pressure control decks. It is a super flexible removal that can kill any unit with an amount of health equal or less than our total power that we can spend on Flail. It is a nice answer to exposed opposing relic weapons against Armory, for example. And unlike Torch, it has great synergy with stash and also makes stash more tempo efficient basically. So the card is basically everything Torch would be in a lot of other decks and what we would want Torch to be for this deck. So not sure how I like didn't see that earlier or came up with it earlier, because it makes so much sense once I started thinking in that direction. It's just perfect basically, and the deck feels amazing now. Like it feels much more powerful, much more fluid. It feels more flexible. It has more flexible ways of dealing with annoying units and stuff, and the triple stash gives you so much more like gas to work with, and it's just great. Like the deck feels really amazing now. It like felt really good before, and now it really feels like a very strong, very consistent deck, and I can only recommend picking it up. The only other minor change I basically made is I cut a Shadow Sigil for another Fire Sigil to increase the chance of early double fire for Charchain Flail, since I think it's more important to be able to use Flail in aggressive matchups early than play Slumbering Stone on turn 1. Like, you don't get too much by playing a Slumbering Stone on turn 1, and we still have like 13 sources for turn 1 Slumbering Stone, so it will still happen reasonably often. And overall, we have a lot of shadow sources still with Vara's favor. One thing that I want to like discuss here, and that is really important, is this card is so much better than Oblivion Spike. Like, don't underestimate that. The fact that this is like a flexible, cheap early game card is such a big deal, and that it has that like profitable interaction with stash of being able to like stash on 6 power and kill something immediately, while Spike is like a slightly more powerful flail that lacks all the flexibility and is like super clunky, and most of the time in a lot of situations with the things that you want to kill, especially at the point where you can play Spike, Spike will die immediately as well. Like, I don't get why people are so eager to play Spike. Like, for example, there's this list that cuts the Force Kalis for a Spike, which makes no sense at all. Like, Kalis is so important in a lot of matchups, and like cutting one completely like cripples the deck and reduces the win percentage in matchups where you like depending on Kalis. The card is just so good. Like, don't cut that card. And yeah, other than that, nothing really changed. There's still like 4 Combust, 4 Drone, like 4 of everything basically, and now the 3 Stash, 3 Flail, 25 power. Also, don't touch the power. That means also Vara's favor. Like, I've seen lists that just simply cut to Vara's favor, because why not just cut 2 power from a deck that it needs? I mean, the deck wants to hit 5th power by turn 5 almost every time, because it has stashes, it has Flail, it has Madness plus Devour, it has so many like combo plays where it wants to do 2 things in one turn. Like, the deck is even happy about its 6th power and often doesn't care too much if it draws a 7th power. The 29 are already like the minimum basically you need to run, and they are like very important. Don't cut it. Also, Vara's favor is like the best shadow card in the game basically, and does so much. Like, it is not only a power, it's also like a great interaction spell that kills Auric Runehammers and a lot of units and pops Aegis on players and on units. It's just like an incredibly powerful power card. Like, it's basically a lot of the time a hard 2-for-1, which is incredible for basically what amounts to be a power land. Like, you can't get better than this. Like, my main reason usually wanting to be Shadow in this game is so that I get to run for Vara's favor, because the card is like 10 times better than any other favor. While the other favors generate like some marginal incremental advantage usually, Vara's favor is like the favor that generates like incredible value and like has board impact. The only other favor that is remotely capable of this is Talia's favored in Obelisk decks basically. But yeah, you basically need to be an Obelisk deck for Talia's favor to come close to Vara's favor, which makes it pretty limited. While Vara's favor you can basically jam into any shadow based deck, especially if it's mid-range or control. Alright, I don't think I need to say much about the other cards at this point anymore. I think I covered them enough. Feel free to check out Scrap Metal V2 and the original video for more explanations and discussions of the choices and the deck in general. Not gonna go too deep into this here again, since this is the 3rd video on the archetype. And yeah, that's it for the updated version. The deck just got so much better. Give it a try. I think by now it's probably a top deck, and it really feels well positioned. It feels really powerful. I like the one matchup that is kind of troublesome still is Shimmer Pack, but that's like the only matchup that feels truly bad basically, because their Shimmer Pack trumps our Torrent of Spiders, and they have so many units that it's hard for us to keep them all in check, and Scouting Party is just a pain to beat. So that's basically the matchup where you would need to sideboard something like Stray into Darkness or something to punish them for overextending. Because if they don't overextend, then the matchup is fine. So you basically just need to punish their way of like beating us, and then you have a fair chance to take them head on. Alright, that's it for the updated deck list. I'm gonna hop into some late season Masters League games to maybe climb another slot. I'm currently at 7, and I wouldn't mind to get back to 6. I was at 6 yesterday night when I went off, but got passed down to 7. So maybe I can reclaim that 6, or maybe even get into top 5. That would be sweet. So stay tuned for some Scrap Metal V3 live in action in a moment. Thanks for watching.